So this next poet, what can I say? It is a pleasure of my life to be able to introduce. Mercedes Ng is a poet, a text-based artist. She is the author of Mercenary English, first and second edition, and Prison Industrial Complex Explodes, which won the Dorothy Livesay Poetry Prize, and most recently, My White Mama, which she's going to read from tonight. Merce is also the author of a number of chapbooks, such as Rally, which was published in collaboration with the Known as Illegal Collective, and also contributed to Surveillance, and Mayday with press release. That's it for the bio in typical form. It's a microscopic bio for Mercedes Ng, so I guess without further ado, please welcome my friend and poet sister, Mercedes Ng.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to be reading from my new book, My White Mama, and I'd like to dedicate this reading to my ma. Race according to my white mama. When I first heard Cher's hit song, Half Breed, on the radio, I asked my mom what that was, and she said, "That's you." She was a big fan of 60s, 70s Cher, who, according to my mother, was always glamorous and cool and never wore the same pair of bell-bottoms twice. So I don't think my mom understood that I would internalize the lyrics of the chorus when trying to place myself in the prairies of southern Alberta, where the only people who looked like me were what racist white people called half-breeds, the Métis, and the Indigenous children of de-statused Indigenous mamas and white dads. Mariah, according to my white mama. When I talk about what it was like to grow up surrounded by white people on the prairies in the 80s, though it seemed like the 50s, my mom tells me in a so there tone that Mariah is a mixie and that people love her. I tell my mom that Mariah has talked publicly about feeling some type of way about being what she calls biracial, which is why on the early album covers, her hair is obscuring her face. There is a long pause, then I didn't know that. I wish her first response wasn't a disavowal of my experience. I wish when I said this to her, she didn't disavow my experience again by telling me that my sibling didn't feel any shame about being a mixie. My sibling who in adulthood says, "You're more Chinese than me." Mood disorder. The irony of my mental illness, bipolar 2, matching my biracial blood. Me and Mariah, we may not go back like babies with pacifiers, but this is another thing we have in common. For me, being bipolar isn't amazing. I just hate it. When I got my diagnosis, I was surprised and immediately was like, where are my delusions of grandeur? Why am I not writing award-winning albums and marrying Kim Kardashian and storming across the stage at the VMAs to tell Taylor Swift that the award doesn't belong to her, but to Beyonce, even though I'm not even into Beyonce? Rice. My father's mother was the first girl in her family with unbound feet. Certainly, she had an unbound mind. So she knew what it was to have a fast-flowing river inside her, too. But her river was Zhujiang, and when it told her to run, she did. The same when my grandpa tie-dyed and she got his money. Running to Reno or Vegas with her girlfriends to gamble, or staying home to listen to Cantonese opera records and play mahjong for money and drink Johnny Walker Black. Potatoes. My white grandma once asked me, "Who do you think you are, the Queen of Sheba?" Why, yes, white grandma, I do believe I'm a hot biblical queen of color, wreaking havoc and generally causing a ruckus, because unlike you, I dream beyond this town, this river valley, this province, this nation state, this gender. But it's not all her fault that she was constantly reminding me not to get too big for my britches, because she was born and raised in a time where women didn't wear pants. Like, she didn't wear pants until her 70s, and I don't remember her in a dress after my mom got her to try pants. My white grandma was someone you'd want around when the apocalypse that white people keep making movies about gets here, although the apocalypse is already here. You'd want her around because for decades she grew all the food that she ate, except sugar, coffee, flour. Planted seeds, tended plants, ate of harvest since she was in single digits, helping her family in the fields, bragged by her father to be strong as an ox. I haven't contributed to the growing of food that I eat since I was a child, and when I did, it was with my white grandma. A song for Audra's Métis mother. I dedicated my first book, not to my mother, but to Terry Lynn Rivard MacDonald, the mother of my childhood best friend, Audra. Terry is the only one I remember. Believing in my dream of being a writer, asking me about my dream of being a writer, making me believe that shit was possible. She never judged me or my crazy fam when other mothers, white mothers, wouldn't allow their children to play with me because my dad was an addict, a convict, because he wasn't white. A song for Audra's Métis grandmother. Sovereign nation of her body, named after the grandmother of Europe, given to Jesus to the convent at 8. The way to godliness is the cleanliness of Mother Superior's menses cloths. So when the adopted son of the Rivards rolled up and said, "I'm a cowboy baby," she said, "Let's fucking ride." And they did. A song for my white mama. I wish I could write a song for my mom, like Tupac did for his dear mama. Me and Tupac cradled in amniotic fluid the first time we entered the walls of a prison. Tupac's mama was a Black Panther who resisted the system. My mom is the system. Rideshare. My mom used to give rides to women whose men were inside, men who, when they found out that my mother was driving from Alberta to one of the prisons around southern Alberta, asked my dad if my mom could help them out. One girl, when we went to McDonald's for lunch, only bought a large pop, but no food for her and her 2-year-old son. So my mom bought them lunch. My mom has been giving rides since before I can remember. If you understood how hard the prison industrial complex works to isolate prisoners from their blood and chosen families, you would understand how important this labor of my mother's was. Strip search. One time at Drumheller Pen, the male guards wanted to strip search the women and the children before a visit, which I'm sure is illegal, but the white man says what is illegal and what isn't. My mom refused to let these white men touch her or her children, and it helped the other mothers refuse too. Last one. This body. This body is mix and match. This body is muddy. This body is miscegenated. This body is misgauged, miscoated. This body is cherry blossom cheeks and barbecue pork scented sorrow, clotted cream, and schnitzel. This body doesn't belong. This body doesn't belong to anyone. This body is heavy with stories. This body is lonely, is a freshet, is an estuary. This body is knowledge. This body sets fires. This body is alleged. This body is the dust of life. This body is mad. This body is bipolar. This body is biracial, bifurcated, in parts. This body is kintsugi. This body is social act. This body is the longitudinal study of the effects of colonialism, racism, and exoticization. This body is sovereign, though Fred Moten teaches that sovereignty was never intended for this body. And Billy Ray Belcourt teaches this body that some bodies are unbodied. And Sarah Hunt teaches that sovereignty and bodies matter. This body is a blood memory. This body is irreducible. This body holds ancestors. This body is descent, deficit, deficient, defaced, desired, delinquent. This body is a reliquary. This body is a full cellar. This body is a luxury problem. This body is discount Cartier. This body is nouveau riche, is niche, askew. This body ascends, descends. This body is subterranean. This body is place. This body is a border crossing. This body is taking up space. This body is itinerant. Could this body be medicine? This body is indexical, is ephemeral, is star-seated, is transgressive. This body is vernacular melanin. This body is sick and tired. This body is rhizomatic. This body is wanted, is sustainable. It's pressure. This body is a contact zone, is cusp, dawn, dusk, door, window, midnight, noon. This body is economically sound. This body is depreciating. This body is planted through with Oregon grape. This body is a seed bomb. This body drops seed bombs all over this thing called a city. This body does it wrong. This body is a university. This body is little sister, big sister, holds all her sisters. This body is a beginning, a coyote root, a story. This body is paradoxical, is a small detail, is not a single event, is in arrears, is never good enough for some. This body is good enough for many. This body is a love letter. This body is a flame, is a cycle, a ship, a clear, pure sound. This body is in process. This body is woo-woo. This body is thunderstorms, is a suitcase, is a palimpsest, is an unreliable narrator. This body is question, is answer, is conundrum. This body has a lot to say. This body is transcendent. This body is perfect. This body doesn't need to be fixed. This body is a murder of crows, a pack of stray dogs. This body is. This body is incongruent. This body is grease-stained. This body is every Mariah dance track that ever made you want to move your body. This body is emotions. This body's going to make it happen. This body is fantasy. This body is honey. This body's got the juice. This body is like Prince Paul's production on De La's Balloon Mind State. This body is performance art, is conceptual. This body is the break, is a work song, is a freight train, is a crossroads. This body is a playlist for radical self-love. This body is like AI playing MJ. This body is like Ben Wallace making his free throws. This body is like Ray Allen making that step back three with 5.2 seconds left on the clock to win Game 6 of the 2013 NBA Finals, then win Game 7 to take the championship. This body is Kawhi Leonard, signing with the Toronto Raptors for a year, breezing on in, winning a championship, making Canadian history, then bouncing back to his home ground to play for the people and the place he comes from. This body is, this body is, this body is. This body raised the cities. This body started a war. This body ended a war. This body is a rocky road. This body is a trick of the eye. This body shines, waters. This body is a dream. This body is part settler. This body settles. This body is home. This body is a miracle, and it's mine. This body came from my white mama, and I love it, and I love her. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mercedes. That was amazing.